Hello there. Good afternoon, because it's just gone noon, so I can say that now. Welcome to the next session, which I'm going to introduce. My name is Tim McNeil. I'm a professor of design at the University of California in Davis. I'm also director of the UC Davis Design Museum as well. I'm going to introduce just very briefly the names of our three speakers. Firstly, Tricia Austin from Central St Martins at the University for the Arts in London. Dr. Chen from the National Museum of Natural Sciences in Taipei. And Magui Kampf from M+E Design in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Some of the things that we're going to hear our speakers talk about today, and what I'd like to have a more continued dialogue and discussion about at the end of their speaking sessions, are sort of asking questions like, what are the strengths and values that designers bring to the table when it comes to presenting challenging topics around social engagement? What does it mean for the designer to be working outside of the museum and engaging with the community? Are museums supposed to be agents of change? Should their focus be on collections and narratives around these objects, and not about information dissemination? And how do designers within the confines of their institutions take on challenging and controversial subject matter? So with that, I'd like to introduce Tricia Austin, who will be the first speaker this afternoon.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here in Hong Kong. It's a fantastic, exciting city and a wonderful conference. So I'm just going to do a quick summary of what I'm going to cover this morning. And I'll just kick off. So, first of all, I'm going to talk about the insights from the Future of the Museum project, jointly undertaken by the course I run, MA Narrative Environments at Central St Martins, and the multinational engineering and architecture company, Arup. Then I'm going to talk about envisioning museums as agents of change, addressing social and environmental issues in the local community, and show you a case study of a project that we're currently working on right now. Then I'm going to sum up by discussing the designer as a creative and critical mediator in a shift away from traditional curation towards open source participatory models of exhibition making. So starting with the Future of Museum project. This is a project we undertook with Arup Foresight Research and Innovation. And this is Arup's internal think tank and consultancy, and it's focused on the future of the built environment. And they published this Museums in the Digital Age out of the project. What they do is they serve clients and industry from a broad range of regions and sectors, and they help them to understand the trends and explore new ideas and radically rethink the future of their businesses. So, on our projects with Arup, we have our MA students, and they develop narrative scenarios based on Arup's research and interpret them into visual form. So imagine Arup has written papers, and we make the pictures, if you like. And here we have a timeline, for example. Now we get there by asking big questions first. So about the various different trends that shape museums, economic trends, climate change, politics, culture, it's very wide, technology, and then through these themes we pick up and run with various scenarios to imagine various futures. And this is the kind of material that we work from. So again, written material and charts, other people's research. So through our project with Arup, we identified 3 key trends for the Museum of the 21st Century. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of an explanation of what I mean by these in a second, but we've got content diversification, immersive experiences, and sustainable and open spaces. So by content diversification, what I mean is that there is a broadening of content. We're envisaging a broadening of content because there are a broadening number of audiences. There are multiple generations, different interest groups, people coming from all over the world with different value systems. So that's a change. And then we have personalized content as well as mass content. And then we have visitors who are actually there collecting and curating their own collections as well as visiting. So they're not just passive. They're doing this without us really being able to tell what they're doing. So there's a question there for the museum about how that is incorporated into the museum strategy. There's also this question, which I know we're going to discuss, which is if people can get all their information online, why do they even bother to go to the museum? So then, by immersive experiences, what I'm really talking about there is the audience is moving from looking at to being in the exhibit. And I think we're all very familiar with these, but this is beautiful image of birds and other animals hanging in the glass atrium of Muse at the Science Museum in Trento, Italy, which you might have seen. And then the third trend, sustainable and open spaces. This can be interpreted in so many different ways. This is an example of the nomadic museum, which was built to move around and to house the ashes and snow photography and film exhibition. So it can be redesigned and adapted. It was made out of shipping containers, as you can tell. So the shape changes as the museum changes, as the museum travels. And then we have Julien de Casabianca's Outings project, which we're going to be seeing. Hang on a minute, wrong one. Is it working? This one here. We'll be hearing from Julien later today. So he releases the artworks into the urban environment. And as you will be familiar with this sort of beautiful work where we've got Spanish artist Alicia Martin, and she's got hundreds of books pouring out of the second-story window of the Museum Mermano in The Hague. This was part of the 2012 International Paper Biennale. So the work is moving out of the museum in different ways. So what I'm suggesting here, that museums actually are taking even a further step, that they can be impacting the social fabric of the city itself through interventions in public realm. And this is the case study I'm going to be talking about to explain why I think there's something new going on. This is a new kind of activity which requires partnerships and other organizations. And this again seems to be a trend, that there are more and more partnerships developing. So this is the Sydney estate in Somerstown, and I'll show you where that is. So here's Central St. Martin's and in London, and you can see, I don't know if my pointer will work, but you can see three great big stations there. That's King's Cross, St. Pancras, and Euston. And then if we look here, we'll see just beside us, about 5 minutes walk away, the Crick Institute. It's a new medical institute. And then just a bit further down there, the Wellcome Collection, which is a science collection. And then here in the middle is the Sydney Estate. And the Sydney Estate is owned and run by Origin Housing, which is a housing association. And these are our partners. So the Francis Crick, you can see that this is a brand new building. It's large, not very pretty, And the organisation needs to win acceptance, actually, in the local community. Right beside here, you've got a lot of council housing or social housing, and they were not very pleased that this large institute landed here on their doorstep. They would prefer more housing or a park. So the Francis Crick is working really hard to make friends, and it has a 7-strong community engagement team. And here's the Welcome Collection. It's a world-renowned public venue which explores the links between medicine, life, art, and part of the Wellcome Trust. And here's Central St. Martin's. We're a world-renowned university, and we're developing creative artists and designers as lateral thinkers, strategists, mediators, enablers, and entrepreneurs. And here's Origin Housing. Origin Housing's been around since 1928. Not only does it look after the fabric of the buildings, but it actually tries to connect people with local resources and create opportunities, especially getting people into work. And here are the people of Somerstown. So Somerstown used to be a mainly white sort of Anglo-Saxon community. There are quite a few people who've lived there all their lives, still living there. And then there's a massive Bengali and Somali immigrant community. And so to give you an example, in the local primary school, 100% of the children do not have English as a first language. So here we have the partners, the Wellcome Collection's mission to bring science to the wider community, the Crick's mission to disseminate medical research and to win acceptance from their neighbours. Origin's mission is to provide housing and connect tenants to local resources, and CSM's mission is to apply creative design thinking practice for social good. Now, there are more drivers at stake than simply the ones that are sort of encapsulated in the last slide. Of course, we all share the same principles to create a more sustainable and democratic world. But we are subject to UK legislation, and there is a bit of law called Section 106, which means that when property developers build new buildings, they have to contribute quite a lot of money to improving the local area, and this is actually of great benefit to Origin Housing. Government legislation in the UK also says that you can't get a science grant if you're a scientist, medical researcher, unless you've got a strategy for communication to non-scientists. And then, of course, museums have to work out how to reach disadvantaged sections of society to be eligible for grants. And then Origin needs to prove that it's got tangible and can make tangible upgrades to its tenants. And CSM, we need to create challenging briefs for our students. But also, we need to demonstrate to grant-making bodies, research bodies, how we make a positive impact on society. So there's a big picture there as well. So there are numerous examples of the Wellcome and the Crick doing what we might describe as outreach. It's very successful outreach. So they're taking their content to hard-to-reach audiences, targeting schools, council estates. Some people might say that's a paternalistic approach, and that's something we might discuss. But I would argue that there are 3 ways in which there's a more radical role appearing for museums and galleries intervening in the social fabric of the city. First of all, actually changing the physical environment of the city outside the museum. Secondly, including the so-called audience in the agenda and the content, so the audience become co-authors. And then there's a pivotal role for designers in mediating between these different partners and providing what I would describe as creative direction. You know, how do we do this? What's it going to look like? How is it achieved? So here we go back to the Sydney estate. As you can see, courtyard, now bleak, empty, dark, at night, unsafe. So the Wellcome Collection had done some work down there, and their outreach people had connections with Origin, and they had run some workshops, and they found out that local residents were dissatisfied with their public space, and that they could imagine it as an outdoor living room. So the Wellcome and Crick conceived of a festival of light, by chance, about last year, and that seemed to chime with an idea of an outdoor living room. So Wellcome and Crick both have funds, which is very important, and Origin has builders on site, was also very important. So first of all, the partners came up with craft workshops. So they went out and they were teaching people how to do different kinds of crafts, but they didn't know how to interpret the idea of an outdoor living room. What would it comprise of? What would be appropriate to that place, to those people? What would be its scale, its color, its density? What would be the process of making it? How would they achieve a sense of ownership? What would be its legacy? How could it be updated by residents over time? So all these questions were unanswerable to them at that moment. So they recognized that they needed strategic designers involved, and that's why they invited CSM to take part. So what's fantastic about this project is that we had all these different things in place. So there was sufficient funding, there was outward-facing policy, there were key employees who had a will to make this happen and who knew each other. They trusted each other. There were timely needs, there were opportunities, and there were strategies for public engagement. So CSM joined the group, and we had a 6-person team. An exhibition designer, a graphic designer, an urban designer, these are all students, a curator and photographer, and here they are meeting with the Crick and the Wellcome Origin, all having a think. First of all, these students had to understand the partners' strategy and their vision. But they also went and visited the site and took a good look at that at different times of the day and night, and what the possibilities were. So the first thing that they did was to have a workshop with the local community in the courtyard, and they got ideas about what constitutes a living room. So how close are the chairs? What do you do in a living room? Anyway, so they started to drill down into that. And they collected all sorts of feedback. They looked at the emotions, for example, that you might want to feel, expect to feel in a living room. And then they asked people to vote for the ones that they felt were most appropriate. So by analysing this sort of material, they developed 3 creative directions. Now, their skill was to go past the idea of a settee and a television to think what happens, what people do in sitting rooms. They came up with the idea of parlour games through talking to the community, and then they drilled down into this particular one, pick-up sticks, which you probably know. They kind of liked these sticks because they resembled DNA, so they had a sort of science association with them. And they also provided, if they thought, if you have large pickup sticks, and now they have designed 3-meter-high pickup sticks that are about that wide, made out of steel poles, they provide a surface onto which you can put various, if you like, exhibits. So here we have the kind of quick rendering of what that might look like. And then they went back to the, down to the courtyard and did another workshop where they evolved how this might look, how big these things might be, where they might go. So they went away and then they made models. So drawings are great, but models are even better. So you can really see what it looks like in the space. And then they took the models back for people to comment on. So that's workshop 3. So they're going back numerous times, and Origin, the Housing Association, was astonished. They could not believe how much attention their residents were getting. So the winning model was this one here. This is so we've got a checkerboard just suggesting games, and then these giant pickup sticks. And then we've got furniture, which was inspired by this kind of research where you can look at the lighting of poles or the way poles might be big enough for people to actually sit inside them. And then there's a daytime visualization here. So it's quite a light touch installation. And here's nighttime, so it sort of glows in the evening, makes it a safer place, makes it quite welcoming. And then the idea is that more workshops can be done between the crick, the welcome, the residents, and more, if you like, content can be generated. They might be talking about different aspects of science or medicine, and people can put their own content on there, as well as the crick and the welcome being able to put their content on there. So they've created an outside gallery space, as well as an installation, an outdoor living room. And of course, with seating there, people will go and sit there as well. I mean, that's the trick of it. So that there'll be a much more a sort of communal feel to the space. So this is the kind of process then as we look at what you need, in a sense, to make something like this kind of project to work. So going back over the outward-facing policy, the key employees, the timeliness, the strategies for public engagement, and adding to that designers as researchers, as strategists, as creative directors coming up with ideas of how to express other people's thoughts and getting people involved in those thoughts and that curation of the actual content, the co-design, what does it look like, real tangible outcomes and capabilities of having that made and installed. But you also need somebody maintaining, managing, evolving and evaluating the use of these things and the impact of the installation. It is a long journey. So my final sort of remark is that, unfortunately, in many museums in the UK, designers are thought of as the person in marketing who does the poster. There is no understanding of what an asset a designer is, of thinking strategically, of thinking creatively, of being a mediator, and actually making things happen in a way that otherwise would not happen. Everything would just stay on paper. So, here we are. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of my presentation is Displaying and Engaging Visitors in Difficult Issues, a study of visitor comments on when the south wind blows. My presentation is going to be in 3 parts. First, I will introduce the design of this exhibition, and I will analyze the visitor comments and come to a conclusion. When the south wind blows, the story of Taipei village was held from December 2014 to June 2015 at the National Museum of Natural Science in Taiwan. And this is an exhibition about the air pollution and the health issue of local residents in Taipei village. And Taipei village is located in southwestern Zhanghua County, Taiwan, on the northern bank of the Zhuoshui River, while the plant is on the southern bank of the river in Yunlin County. In 1998, 398 smokestacks of Formosa Plastic Corporation's 6.5-ton cracker were completed. They are easily visible from the village across the Zhuoshui River. And every summer, when the south wind blows, it carries smokestacks emission northward and directly across Taipei village, forcing residents to live not only with the smell of chemical compounds, but also with the health hazard brought by the many toxic compounds. A survey conducted in 2012 by Professor Zhan Changhuang of National Taiwan University identified a long list of chemical compounds and heavy metals, many of which are known to harm human health and cause cancers. So my research questions are, how may a Museum of Natural Science contribute to protect the environment by exhibition design? And how successful was the exhibition in encouraging visitors to more deeply reflect upon this issue? And my methods are analysis of exhibition and visitor comments. The primary exhibits in this exhibition was a collection of 102 photographs taken by Zhong Shengxiong and Xu Zhentang, and documented by written text, documentary film, and video clips, and 3 computers for visitors to leave comments. And the curators choose 3 elements in his fieldwork to design the exhibition. They are the courtyard house, and the embankment, and the canal that flows through the Taipei village. And here is the layout plan of the exhibition. And in the central zone, which divided the exhibition into 2 parts. And the central inside zone of the exhibition imitates the road and the canals of the village, and by the blue footlight. And when you enter into the B zone, it is the thing of visiting Taipei village, which focuses on Taipei village's elderly and very young residents to underscore the chronic problems of aging population and intergenerational households. And into the C area, this is an exhibition of the residents of Taipei village. And you can see the exhibition table imitates the courtyard house of the Taipei village. And in the E area, it's about working along the water. And you can see this imitates the embankment of the village. And there is a screen projecting the film of the plant, which just as the resident sees in the village. And this part describes the story of a village's fishing life, such as Wei's story. His father passed away in 2001 from cancer, and Wei fishes for a year fry in winter and takes on part-time job during the rest of the year to support his 4 children and the elderly mother. Wei says that, my ancestors told us that if you have your fields and the sea, you will never get hungry. Since the plant has come, we don't have anything. And in the D area, it is about a portrait in the south winds. It examines the effects of the cancer and on the residents. And over half of the image here depict the family members of cancer victims holding a picture of their lost relatives and staring directly into the lens of camera. Such as Cai Caifeng's story. Cai's hands are swollen. She's now 79 years old. Her late husband passed away in 2011 from lung cancers, following many years of pain and suffering. And the curators set up 3 computer stations with 3 questions and in different exhibition section to elicit visitors' response. And the research team reviewed all of the 1,780 comments and classified them into 4 major categories. And these 4 major categories are 46% are comments on the exhibition content, and 17% are answers to the question raised by the curators, and the rest, 37% are not directly linked to the exhibition. So I will focus on the first two categories. The finding highlights that many visitors perceive strong feelings of empathy. Some even express being moved to tears, such as Miss Chen. Seeing everything like that, the sorrow of it made me cry. The camera lens led me through so much helpless and hard acts. And many visitors become very critical to the government and corporations, such as Ms. Nian. High pollution industry are the most profitable, while profits flow into the pocket of the corporations. Locals are left to suffer the consequence of this pollution. And some visitors show high expectation of the museum, and such as Ms. Lan. I'm wondering if the content of the exhibition will be organized into a report format and submitted to local government so they can take a more serious and proactive approach to this problem. And the exhibition also inspires civic responsibility and actions, such as Miss Chen. Our beautiful islands of Taiwan is now one unified ecosystem. Today, no one can afford to stand dispassionately on the sideline. Only two of them think that's the price the president has to pay for the price of pursuing interest, such as this one. While watching the film in the protest during the meeting at the end, I found that some of the villagers were simply upset that they hadn't benefited for profit from the plant. And in the second part, I will analyze the comments answer to the given questions raised by the curators. The first question is, how have you experienced the significant cracker in your everyday life? A total of 58 visitor comments addressed this question. Many of them thought it was only economic issues. After the visit, they realized it is an environmental issue too. Also, there is a debate among the visitors who left comments, such as one point out, although the plant has done damage, it has sustained a lot of families, but the others criticize. While the plant does bring jobs for some families, are you willing to be the one asked to be sacrificed? And the second question are, which do you think to be more important, economic development or environment protection? Also, are these two necessarily mutually incompatible? And 145 visitors' comments address this question. 66 value environment is more important, and 41 think they are equally important, and 36 think we need more thoughts on this issue. Only 2 of them think the economic development is more important. And for those who think the environment is more important, it's because there is a close relationship between the environment and the human survival. Such as Mr. Huang, I feel the sacrificing of our good environment will make life for humanity miserable indeed. Placing a high value on the environment is not necessarily a moral act. It is the choice that protects our own interests. And some others think they are both equally important, such as Ms. Pong. The 2 are of equal importance. We just need to use legal means to set the relevant moral boundaries. And some think that we need more thoughts on it, such as Ms. Chen. I feel this is a very important problem that can only be addressed with sufficient scientific evidence and social debate. And only 2 of them think the immediate benefits is more important. As long as the profits are big enough, who in their right mind cares about the environment? How long do we have to live anyway? And especially also linked to the environmental protection activism. In 2008, wetlands in the Zhuoshui River estuary were approved to use by the Guoguang Petrochemical Corporation, and opposition to the project eventually grew into a national movement. And Taiwan President Ma, under the pressure, formally announced his opposition to this plan in 2011 and designated the Dacheng Westland as an ecological area of national importance. So the third question is, do you think the George River estuary should be protected? How should this protection be implemented? A total of 104 visitor comments address this question. Of these, a very high rate, 101 of the comments acknowledge the importance of protecting this George River estuary. The main reason is Westlands are the treasure of Taiwan, such that as the school student thinks, Westlands are treasure of Taiwan. We should cherish them and not allow business people or notorious factories to damage them. And they also propose action to be taken, such as putting decision-making authority in the hands of the local residents, or start from the education and change the mindset. So I will go back to my research question. What can the museum exhibition do to further the cause of environmental protection? And during the exhibition, the Yunlin County Magistrate Li Jingyou was invited to visit the exhibition, and he promised to take effective measures to improve the problem of air pollution in the Yunlin County. And soon afterwards, the Yunlin County Council passed a ban on the burning of soft and petroleum. However, the regulation was rejected by the central government as it is against the national regulation. And this action spurred the Yunlin County government to protest, a petition to the legislative yuan directly. And this is an ongoing conflict and not resolved yet. So from this research, it shows that exhibition may be used to give a public voice to the formerly neglected shouts and sorrows of the disadvantaged and the marginalized. Apart from eliciting sympathetic responses from the Yunlin County government and the general public, the exhibition holds the potential to realize the vision of its curators, to blow the message northwards to Taipei, following the touring exhibition, recruiting an increasing number of citizens and public officials into protecting the environment and safeguarding human rights. And thank you for listening.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Suzanne, KF11, and Leicester University and Hong Kong University for making this Congress possible. I'm an architect and scenographer, and for 4 years now, I'm running M+E Design, a company based in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, with two partners, a museologist and a product designer. At the beginning, when we created the company, our focus was on exhibition design, purely. We were asked to bring special solutions for exhibitions with a very technical approach. But as years went by, we found out that our work could go further than simply providing a good design solution for a client. We realized how some visitors could get deeply touched by some special content, even if it wasn't planned on the conception phase as an emotional trigger. We understood that people who get emotionally involved by the exhibition did have a more profound experience with the content and the whole event. As a consequence, the content experience becomes fixed on their memories through the emotions lived on that moment. On this slide, we have a father and his children learning on a huge open-air map on the Earth from Above exhibition during Rio +20. Again, some parents getting together with their child on the exhibition The Storyteller Carpets. And the last two on Senna Emotion, an exhibition to remember Ayrton Senna's life story, a Formula One pilot and a great Brazilian idol, that on 1994. On the upper photo, a child who never saw his races, but is already connected to his values through the family memories transmission. And the lower photo, older people revisiting and letting some tears drop, some few seconds of each Senna's victory. One of our great discussions is about building cultural exhibitions and museums that doesn't promote engagement with its public. On one hand, creating special solutions for a very technical and straight content show, or, in other hand, building great spectacular exhibitions, almost empty of content and legacy. So, finally, it gets clear for us that our aim as a social responsible company was to use cultural exhibitions to generate positive social impact on society by helping visitors to transform content into knowledge. But before we get any further on this, let me bring some context from the cultural environment in my country nowadays. Brazil's economic culture is passing through an important period of transformation. After some years where we had an improvement on the government efforts to stimulate cultural production, now we can see this politics is turning to its end. The cultural sector, especially museums, are driving for a system where the economic autosustainability is required. We see museums starting to face what Britain passed about 20 years ago, a process of cultural industrialization. The notion that culture, and especially in this case, museums can bring financial return is quite new in our society. The vast majority of museums institutions still work as public service, depending exclusively on public financial support. But this status is softly starting to change with the birth of new management politics based on public-private partnership, the so-called social organization, or OS. We see a hurry on transforming institutions on self-sustainable organizations with an intention to provide them more autonomy faced to economical crisis and, at the same time, to promote the development of this sector as economical pillar. Museums need urgently to learn how to generate profit for self-funding to assure their own existence. And the only path for this is through public engagement and social relevancy. According to research made this year on Rio de Janeiro's cultural map, only 30% of the population see museums as a larger option of their free time. It is not hard to imagine that this share of population is a very specific one: the Caucasian middle class, university-level man, or the so-called Brazilian social majority. But what happened to the other 70% of the public that just don't see museums as an option? Why don't they choose museums? Brazil has a great social diversity, but was continuously represented by only one class. We see nowadays a big effort on social minorities to fight for their rights, economical place, and relevancy, starting with their own cultural expressions. Building culture by and for the social majority generated a huge gap on cultural educational efforts for centuries. It is time now to museums turn themselves to the 70% and start to create actions to provide social change based on identification and integration. The first step is to rebuild the message transmission system being used by museums. Brazilian museums' speech are still based on a hierarchical construction process. The knowledge transmission is ruled by the curatorial and museum staff, and often it is built with a language structure that is not accessible for most of us. This means that a unidirectional way of communication is established: a specialist, a content, and a space, and the public. A message construction system very recurrent on several museum institutions on the 20th century. In this case, even if the exhibition space result is delightful, the message to be transmitted is narrowed by the speech of few voices, focused on specialists, trying to reach the most range of receivers with different backgrounds. And often, it is not being presented in appropriate codes for general understanding, especially when we take into account our fragile public educational system, which is frankly available for those 70%. Although we are aware that museum staff will always command the communicational process, it is needed to be considered our plural and lively culture, as well as our social backgrounds. Diversification on museums' communicational strategies must be made by shifting it into a more attractive, friendly, and wider language. In view of this, we propose a transformation on the museum communication process paradigm, a change that acts directly on values, procedures, processes, and purpose questions from inside institutions to outside. The communication relationship between the public and the museum has to be upgraded to another level, more democratic, inclusive, and connected to the 21st century public. A public that has found its free speech space either on digital media communication and open street expressions, but must find an open space to converse with curators, co-create content, and transform the message space. We want to diffuse the idea of museums as platforms for discussion, identification, and creative production, more than the traditional view of museums as the holy temple of knowledge. We believe that museums must act as aggregators and appropriate the visitor's speech and knowledge to be part of the museum message. Visitors must see themselves reflected in the museum image in multiple and diverse ways. So we started to translate these conceptual approaches into structured strategies to be implemented on museum and exhibition daily life. We are working on special methodologies to be applied in 3 different phases on the project development: the curatorial phase, the content developing on pre-production phase, and the exhibition design or output phase. We are going briefly over those methodologies now. The very first approach on message transmission, transformation begins on the curatorial phase. As we saw, one of the problems concerns on the creation of a mono-speech based on specialized creative minds. I must, however, emphasize that there is nothing wrong about the specialists. But how can we construct a wider speech on this phase? We propose a system of collective curatorial construction. It is based on inviting other voices to build, together with the museum curators, the subject, the curatorial line, the content, and the general outputs of a new exhibition. Those voices are the own museum staff that is not often concerned by creation, such as communication, public relationships, educational program, etc. Eventual research or technical museum pairs that used to provide raw information and content. It can be since the historicists to scientific researchers, depending on the museum principal subject. A creative group that is able to visualize how the content can be translated into the space exhibition: architects, artists, digital media creators, designers in general. Representatives from society, chosen by their connection to the main team. Representatives from the museum community, to be clear that the message can be transmitted for the very first public, the neighborhoods. And the curators, directors, museologists, specialists on whoever is engaged with museum content and message production. The methodology puts all these voices together to promote a collective construction, a collaboration system for the content and design creation, with the aim to construct them with more openness mind, and diverse voices. To put this phase into practice, we use some collaborative tools, work tools, to stand the creative process, such as the establishment of basic agreements, the dreaming circle, where we find out which are the individual's dreams for this work, the golden circle, where we can define easily the very first purpose of any action, and the World Café, where we can promote effective discussions on bigger groups towards the same objectives. All those are collaborative tools which have their own methodology. At this point of the development of the methodology, we are trying it out inside our own creative group by inviting special multidisciplinary guests to build up content and design solutions together with our clients. The experience has shown us a power to produce more assertivity on client satisfaction and final results. The next challenge is to take this methodology to a more complex system, like the construction of exhibition on a museum and then a whole exhibition season. On these photos, we can see one of this multidisciplinary group co-creating exhibition content on our working space at Rio. The collaborative tool that's being used is the World Café. And here, a very horizontal discussion moment with the directors and curators team of the newest museum in town, the Museum of Tomorrow. The second step is concerned to the content developing or pre-production phase. It is a phase where the inner process is open for general public engagement in order to take real action and be represented by the content exposed. We can use some basic tools to promote engagement, translated on different outputs according to the content, the message, or the target audience. These tools are such as crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, or audience choice. Through them, we engage audience by promoting the sharing of personal stories, testimonials, old family objects or brand new stuffs, affective memories, or through an open decision process to decide which content is more relevant on certain time. On this project, called The Sea Was Here, in phase of conception, we are going to draw a blue line where was the original seacoast position on Rio de Janeiro before the land fulfillment, and expose some historical facts along it. We propose to capture neighbors' stories and memories to expose together with the historical facts, giving same importance for both. We will also have a free audio guide app where we are going to dispose all the contributions collected during the project. On a way to maintain the crowdsourcing action. This project is part of a model project called Museum in Open Air, or Museu a Céu Aberto, Ecomuseu 2.0, that we expect to implement soon. The final engagement on this methodology is when audience feels relevancy and respect on the exhibitions and feel invited to support through collective funding. We must say, in Brazil, crowdfunding is still crawling on what regards the museum sector, especially when compared to international cases such as the Louvre. We are just here with two examples that was on the case of 30,000 reais, which is less than $10,000, and while Louvre is on 5 million euros on 5 years. On 5 different campaigns in the last 6 years, engaging more than 700,000 collaborators. We consider this phase as the turnover on museums' communication with public. It is when the audience voice is elevated to an almost equal plateau to the museum conceptors, and it gains strength and importance by spreading their will. But it's very important to observe that this phase needs a really deep engagement and responsive action on museum direction, because the public participation must be returned to people on concrete responses. Otherwise, an unfinished cycle can denote a fake engagement intention from museum with public, who can feel manipulated and abandon the house. It must be a real intention from museum to promote and maintain this close relationship with public. And finally, the methodologies for the output phase we call the participatory exhibition design. As we saw in the beginning, we believe that emotional experience can provide a deeper relationship between audience and content. There are many ways to stimulate people to be more open to receive information, and it's not just through written language and organized items on space. Diversification on sensorial stimulation contributes for the acquisition of knowledge. Our aim here is to create several approaches on 3 different levels to ensure the audience to have a more complete experience with the content. First, we work with audience on the individual level. The aim here is to promote identification. We search for sensorial, emotional, affective memories stimuli so the content can perpetrate the visitor on an emotional way rather than the rational, logical way. On this sense, there is this exhibition where we needed to explain a new kind of economy based on values and human relationship. For that, we invited visitors to be guided by blind people until the first room, while they hold a glass of water. When left on the room, they could experience the space for themselves and then find an aquarium where they were invited to throw the water out, in an allusion to the Chinese tea fable, when is just able to receive new knowledge if he is able to empty his mind from all those preconceptions he brings with. There was also a video from Bruce Lee, the Be Water, My Friend, that we just love. On the second level, we deal with the space. Taking in consideration that exhibitions are the only media that offer us a simultaneous space and time experience, how can we create really involving space where public can be transported to another universe and forget about where he parked the car, for example? So we research to create narratives, immersive space, rhythm atmosphere to put the visitor completely inside a meaningful story. As example, the Sun Emotion exhibition, where the scenography would like to transmit energy, velocity, and vibration, and the choose for continuous furniture lines, vibrant colors, and low lighting. On this exhibition, the second one, we are talking about the history of Rio Portuary Zone. So we created a ship atmosphere through we also could mention the arrival of billions of African slaves by that port. And the last level, when we deal with the collectiveness. First, we assume that everyone who is on the same exhibition has something in common, even with the most different backgrounds. So invite visitors to co-create, interact with space and content, and transform it through his experience, while stimulating the interaction and the sharing of knowledge between visitors. We can use digital interactive media, but we also believe in the power and universality of pencil and paper. We are not afraid of proposing analogical interactions. Each problem has its better interactive solution. On the example, a room on the New Economy exhibition, where people could use methodologies to create a new product or service while counting on visitors and staff team support. Or where people could collaborate with information on this wall, helping to build a more powerful map of the new economies and initiatives and companies. We are aware that it is not always possible to apply all those levels of engagement on each exhibition. But there is no problem if we start on the beginning of the new conception, thinking what can be done on a more participatory and evolving way. There will be at least one new solution or new process to be adopted. Then we can, little by little, start improving our relationships with space, content, public, and museums. I would like to thank Brazil's Ministry of Culture that makes this presentation possible through the National Cultural Fund. Thank you all.
Okay, so I could invite our three speakers up onto the stage, please, for questions. Three very powerful presentations which really show the ways we can try and engage with audiences. Some things that come to mind as I heard from our speakers were sort of exhibitions that have design playing a role in enhancing space and community interaction. Exhibition design as a powerful tool for advocacy, change, and public information. And emotional engagement with the visitor, how design can contribute in a more democratic form to communication within the museum environment. Indeed, many of what we saw, or most of what we saw today, was not really happening in the museum environment as we know it typically. These were more outdoor spaces and public spaces where the exhibition itself and the mode of communication becomes in the much more public realm. So I'd like to invite questions for our three speakers, if anyone would like to start us off.
Thank you for your talks. It was interesting to see the sort of global diversity and the different challenges, but similar approach and methodology being used as well. I wanted to ask about the role, I guess, in the later stages after the project is implemented in terms of evaluation. And I mean, I was thinking about Tricia Austin, your project you were talking about, what stage that reached, and was there sort of a prototyping stage where it was tested out, how it evolved after completion, because I think probably agree that these projects now tend to, they're not static, they're ever evolving, and I just wanted to kind of bring that question up.
It's a very good question, and I can't answer because we haven't built it yet. But what's looking good is that there is complete buy-in from all the different partners and the community. So I've worked on other projects where, you know, it's been driven really by maybe one or two partners, and you know, the projects afterwards have been abandoned. So it really needs a constant care. So actually, Origin Housing are the key, I think, to it. They care about their people. They're with them all the time, and that's why I have great hopes for it. But yes, we'll find out. It's going in April next year.
I have this question, this big question, like how to assure that this process bring transformation, and as we are together working with the Museum of Tomorrow, and that will be open on December, I guess. We are dealing with the public engagement sector, and the question is, okay, how can we prove for the government and the high institutions that museums are really important for society and can really promote development, and they must be, they should not suffer with economical crisis. They should be in the first and the top of financial support, and that's very complicated system to develop. And now we have on this situation of Tomorrow Museum, they starting from beginning, like they have no community yet, so they can start collecting information from zero, like from when people start visiting museums, and maybe 5 or 10 years later, I don't know how long, but especially if 1 year after, we can retouch these people, reconnect them, and see how the information received on this museum was effective and transformed their life. Then we start to collect data for to prove that, to assure that this is a good solution. I mean, we should maintain the system.
Visitors' comments are part of the evaluation, and from the comments we see that many visitors show their positive attitude of the museum, the role of the museum, and they didn't think about much about the social role of the museum, but from the expression they think the museum can play a bigger role to engage with the social issues.
I wanted to hear about segmenting audiences. So in the UK, we've got a lot of data on who actually goes to our institutions and who exactly those people are. And from my experience with Greater China, we haven't really got that sort of data. So I wanted to see what sort of advances or thought you're applying to this. Because obviously what we've seen here is that we can't apply a Western model to audiences here in Greater China. So any thoughts on that, please?
I'd be really interested to know how diverse the audiences are in China. I don't know that. That would be something I would like to learn through our discussions today, because we are thinking about diverse audiences. It's, you know, and that's absolutely the case in Europe, and I assume in South America. I don't know about China. Maybe somebody here does.
We don't actually. Our challenge is to bring new public to museums, so a public that's not used to frequent museums, and how to dialogue with them, how to make them realize that being on a museum on a Sunday afternoon, especially in Rio de Janeiro with those fantastic beaches, can be interesting, and or to change an afternoon on a shopping mall, on opposition to this cultural thing. Like, so
how to communicate with them, how to engage them, to show them that another possibility can exist. If we keep on working on the same direction, dialoguing with the same methodologies, that won't change. So we have to think differently and start to talk them on the same language, to change museums' language, to aggregate them. I think that could be a driving direction.
Actually, I would say that it's really important not to spend too much money and time writing long documents about who your audiences are, because your audiences are changing rapidly. And once you've got this long document, people can't, get bored to death actually reading them. I would say go out and do it. Do it, make things, and see what happens. Experiment as a strategy. Obviously, that you need money for that, but it can be done quite quickly and can be done quite easily. And I would urge that's much, much more creative and exciting, in my view.
I don't think I can. I don't really know about the audience of China, but maybe Taiwan. And because the National Museum of Natural Science is very popular among the school students, so they attract a lot of school students to come to visit the museum. And usually the museum show or display those more scientific exhibition. And the school teacher didn't expect to see a more social issue exhibition. And when they came to the museum, they found it's really, really educational. And the students are very happy. And they learn something about the other part of the lives of the residents in Taiwan. And also because the museum is quite popular among the general public. So I think it successfully raised the issues to more public, to more audience in Taiwan.
Thank you for the presentations. I thought they fitted together in a really interesting way. My question is really about the participatory aspect of the projects, and it sort of goes to Tricia and Magui, maybe in slightly different ways. I mean, you said how the audiences are themselves invited to be part of the co-creation process, and I was just wondering how you ensure that, in a way, you don't promise them more than it delivers. So what kind of involvement or what kind of input is the audience promised by being invited to contribute, and how much do they then actually find themselves or their own opinions in the results? And then maybe tying over to your presentation, I thought it was really interesting, that quote where it said, oh, could these outcomes be presented to the government as a report? So this idea that an exhibition or the content of an exhibition, and then possibly subsequently my opinion as an audience member, could become something that lives beyond the exhibition, that has some sort of further impact. And I guess it's sort of, my question centers around that. How do you, how does the engagement that you offer not only become some sort of token gesture, but actually has an impact or a legacy beyond that moment of involvement?
Well, I think the trick of success is to be transparent and explain to people that you're not going to be able to do everything that everybody wants, and that you're going to show everybody who's interested what other people's views are. And as we did here, people actually voted on it so that they could see what everybody else had chosen. And there was some confidence that this will happen because of the funding, and also because of the political will of the Origin Housing Estate. So I think if you look at the big picture and you have to make a judgment about, is it really going to happen? Who's going to make it happen? And are we being transparent with our co-creators? But yeah, co-creation is complicated.
That's why we must be really careful when dealing with this co-creation, because expectations can be really big, especially when it's a brand new platform. Like, people were never invited to dialogue on a museum on this way, so they have lots to say. So when you open this space, you can receive anything from anger to political anger. Like I'm not being listened anywhere else. And now the museum is opening, so I want to say that my street doesn't have infrastructure, for example, and how to deal with that. So I think transparency needs to be always there, and we have to be serious and responsible to listen, really listen what they have to say. And I think that comes on Chia-Li direction, like what they said, from asking the museum to take action on political way, like when the museum starts to represent the society on a higher level.
As Professor Sharon McDonald, in her paper on the commons, she pointed out that the visitors' commons play a central role of the exhibition. It is a part of the exhibition too. So when the commons are shown are displayed, and in the exhibition, all the visitors can read the commons. So all these commons become part of the exhibition. And as the exhibition is touring in Taiwan, and these commons are going to be reviewed and viewed by more and more visitors. And as for the report format, I don't think the museum has a plan about that. But as a researcher, I collaborated with the curator to write the research paper and wish to publish it. Yeah.
To Tricia, I suppose in places like Hackney, I've seen kind of installations kind of come in, and there'd be kind of local resistance and a kind of a fear of gentrification or hipsterification, and that area of North London is one where, with the Guardian coming in, where suddenly a lot of communities are moving. Has there been resistance against it? And I suppose passing on, have you encountered resistance within? Have you tried to implement these collaborative methods in institutions where the institution itself has resisted to the point where it hasn't been able to work?
So resistance. I think it's hard to see the resistance. What you do get is non-interest, and suppose that might be classified as resistance. We haven't come across any sort of people sort of overtly and explicitly saying no thanks. And actually, in this case, because it's not a developer doing it, it's not a fancy pants sort of, we're going to make your neighbourhood nicer and make a few million bucks out of it in the meantime. This is, because it's the housing association, I think it's got more credibility. So I think there's a it's not being redeveloped right in that area. Of course, next door it is, in King's Cross. So that doesn't seem to be an issue now, but I don't know, people probably could take offence, and somebody has to be able to talk to them about that. That would be the crick and the welcome, probably.
Well, on the exhibition about new economy that we made, and there was this collaborative creation, there was no resistance at all, because the public is already engaged on sharing economy and collaboration. But on that other exhibition that we are going to create, that we are creating, going to implement on the sea was here, it is especially on a gentrification area. So exactly where the Museum of Tomorrow is being constructed, and 2 years ago the Museum of Art of Rio was created. So it is a portuary zone that was abandoned by decades, about 50 years of oblivion, and nowadays it's the cold point on Rio, that everything's happening there, everything's changing, and how is this community embraced? So I think it will be a real challenge, and the MAR museum, the Museum of Art, is already trying to engage with the community. And they had really big problems on the beginning. Like, why do we need a museum here? And now the second museum, like big museums, why do we need that? And what's this community space inside the museums? And so our exhibition is wants to connect with them and to bring this identification. Like they have the story of the region in themselves, their family, and I think there's no obvious to reach that story. We just can hear the traditional, the official stories, and how to make them share that with us and see how it is important. So until we get at this point, I think we will find resistance always, because they are suffering and they need to express this suffering. So I think this is a really important thing in exhibition design in museums and on this kind, like let people tell where is hurting and express this to other people.
I have the specific question I want to ask Dr. Chen. I think your exhibition is really powerful, impressive, and especially in the National Rand Museum has such an exhibition with very strong emotional impression, which could influence the decision maker. I think it's really impressive, it's very good. But myself, my background is architects, and I teach master planning and architecture design in the university. And I think for me, it's not really a difficult issue. It's really something we have make a big mistake from the very beginning, from the drawing boards. Well, when you really want to find out the location of such a kind of highly polluted plant, you don't want to actually put it on the upper wind of some kind of residence areas. You want to avoid it. So I think whether or not you think, apart from the emotional side of the exhibition, as a natural history museum, we could do something more from the scientific aspect. And as you said, okay, the Natural History Museum has done a lot on the scientific aspect already. But I think this is absolutely a strong case to bring the humanity and the science together. So whether we can actually talk about, okay, apart from the Taipei village, do we have other villages around? And will the density of the pollution reduced? You know, we have 5 kilometers away, further. Or do we have any kind of scientific way to use the natural resource to reduce it? For example, some specific plants might eat the pollutions, or the bacteria or microbes might be used on the sort of certain ways to reduce it. Or we only have the certain way, a kind of the last option left to us is to remove the village. Okay, move the people from this village to somewhere, or simply blow up the plants. So I think apart from kind of emotional influence, whether we should actually bring in more scientific options to the people, that people really to understand why we have this mistake happened, why we simply make a kind of easy things to be a difficult issue.
As I took my students, the master students of the Museum Study Department, to the exhibition, and some of my students think the exhibition should have more scientific evidence, just as you say, how other choices we can have, and how can we reduce the pollution. We do think the Science Museum can play a greater role in providing more information on this. And but in the exhibition, they do cooperate with the university professor at Taiwan, National Taiwan University. And he did a lot of survey on this area, including Yunlin County, where the plant is, and the neighboring county, Taipei village. And he did a survey of several years. It shows that within the 10 kilometers within the plant, there is the highest rate of cancers in Taiwan. And from 10 to 20 kilometers, the rate is a bit smaller, but still higher than the average. And so there is a research on this, but it didn't say about how to reduce the pollution.
End things there, because I know everyone's probably very hungry and ready for lunch. I know we're running a little bit late, so I'm looking at Suzanne on this one. 2:15.
Okay.
We'll resume then
go.
at that time. So thank you very much to our three speakers for very insightful and informative presentations. Thank you.